Okay, we are live. Good afternoon, mystics, mages, and muggles. I'm Lisa Stewart of CoCreate Magick, and today we have on the air Laureli Shimayo. Laureli, would you like to say hello?
Sure. Great to be with you all. This is our first time being on YouTube together. We're excited to share with you about business coaching, mentorship advice. This is free to be here today. We are discovering a new way of sharing our work. So this is a great opportunity if you have an intuitive business, if you are starting an intuitive business, you have a business now that you're wanting to grow, if you want support, you feel stuck in something. The two of us have tons of experience in business. We have experience in our own businesses, working with all kinds of clients, and we are also intuitives. So we are here to support you and be together learning in this new format.
Yeah, so live streaming is new to both of us. Actually, I've done some live streaming, but it was a couple of years ago. So if you could grant us a little patience and grace as we work through the tools and the platform, this will be new for all of us. But I think we'll manage. I think we'll muddle through and we'll make it work. But I think the idea behind getting online and live with you today, Laureli, is that most of the time when we do our drop-in intuitive sessions is they're, cloaked in a closed room. We invite people in and they get an opportunity to talk to us and ask some of their most challenging questions that they've got that day. And I think it would be a lot of fun if anybody had any questions who are listening to us at large to type them in the chat. So that way we could just answer them ad hoc. And I think that would be a splendid way for everyone to get to know us. And figure out how we work and what our demeanor is, what our personalities are, and what our personal philosophies are, just so they can get to know us a little bit better. What do you think?
Yeah, that would be great. And then we'll have a chance to provide some support and some advice along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, would you like to share a little bit about your background and what makes you so perfect to help coach and guide mystics in their business?
Sure, great. So in my current business, I'm an intuitive eye reader, body psychology coach, and matchmaker. So I work with people one-on-one and in groups, and I teach sharing about our eyes, what I pick up in people's eyes. The eyes are the window to the soul. So I'm able to help people get a better sense of who they are, their soul, their purpose, and answer all kinds of questions about their path. I also run all kinds of metaphysics and wellness events in person and online. And when I work with someone with business, I use all the tools that I have. So part of what I do is I read your eyes and I want to look at like a profile or have you send me a photo or something like that if we're not on video together here. And then I answer questions in the context of your purpose, what you're naturally good at and not as strong at. So it might be that there are ways for you to share your capacity in a way that you don't quite realize yet. It maybe there's some lessons to go through, and it could be that it's better to work with a partner on some things in your business that you're not as strong at naturally, and like find someone that's really good at it and work with them and have them do this part to support you. I have lots of experience in business. I mentioned briefly earlier, I've been running my own business since 2009. I've worked inside very small businesses, very large businesses, all kinds of different entrepreneurial contexts, and supported tons of people in their businesses. I also worked in intellectual property for a while, so I know that in terms of a consulting perspective and can bring that into the conversation as well. So I'm excited to support everyone to share their work in the world, be that services or products, whatever that is, share them in a way that's really authentic for them and reaches the people that want what they have to offer. And so I'm excited to be here and to do this with you because I love the diversity of the background. We have similarities and differences at the same time. So
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that we complement each other very well in our backgrounds. So that way, if I can't answer something, you certainly can. And it gives what I have discovered when we do the private intuitive drop-in sessions every other week, like every 2 weeks. I find that there are common themes that many mystics have when it comes to challenges in their businesses. But what's fun is that when they ask the question and you and I are answering, it gives them a holistic view of what might work for them, right? Because they may resonate with something that you say more than they do with me, or you may, touch on a certain aspect. And of course, I love piggybacking and saying, in addition to, you could try this, you can think about this. That gives them that potential of what if, right? Because I think a lot of mystics and creatives get stuck because when they have this problem, this challenge ahead of them, they start creating either blocks or beliefs that tends to get them stuck. And when they come to our intuitive drop-in sessions, we give them more ideas and more things to think about, so that they're not actually making those decisions in a vacuum.
Yeah, a lot of people, they run into a roadblock and they don't know how to get through, and then they get crunched in and stuck there, and they can't like see a bigger perspective. And you know, so we're on your YouTube channel, so people generally know about you, but new people that come in don't know about you. And so maybe share a little bit about you and how your background is different than mine. I just, like, for example, you have so much experience in graphics and design and branding and all these things that I don't do. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. So I've got over 30 years of business experience, right? Working with Fortune 100 companies, small businesses, and nonprofits. I was helping them with their brand development, their brand messaging, their visual ID, like logos and layouts, as well as websites and even mobile apps. So I run the gamut. My background actually started as a graphic designer. I learned on the board, right, where we had T-squares and triangles, and we were doing separations for print production, right? Separations meaning, you know, one layer is red, one layer is actually cyan, magenta, blue, and black. Well, beyond that, right? So moving forward, I started to actually dabble in website design, learning to code websites, HTML, back in the 90s, as I worked in Fortune 100 companies. And moving from there, it was interesting because other artists were like, "Ooh, how did you create that? I want to put my portfolio online." And then it just kind of snowballed. And then I started freelancing. And as I worked for companies like John Deere as lead web designer, and other tech companies, helping them figure out what it looks like to create usability, like UX and UI, in a kiosk for portals that are standalone in different showrooms, whatever that might be, right? So I got a chance to get my feet wet in both UI and UX, in addition to website design. But as I moved on, I formalized my freelance career and started helping small businesses. And that was everything from landscapers to realtors to, gosh, you name it, also designers and artists. Build their websites so they could build their brand and understand what brand messaging was. Because what I found is many people would come to me and say, "Hey, Lise, can you design a website for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Do you have any design guidelines?" And they're like, "No, what are those?" I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, let's walk backwards a little bit. Design guidelines are built off your brand development. Have you done any of that?" "No, what's that?" "Okay." So then that's when I really started to hone in and say, let's talk about your brand messaging and your brand development, all those pieces and parts, right? Those components, the touch points that you develop as you build your business. So that way you're cognizant of what makes your service special, what makes it different from, you know, another landscaper or another construction contractor, right? And in that, then all of those components inform your website. And then that website then brings in the words, the phrases, the imagery that help denote what it means to be distinctive in the marketplace, right? What makes you unique? What makes you stand out, right? Why would somebody choose you? So when I walk through my clients through all of this, it was eye-opening for them. And it was a lot of fun for me, because for me, when I'm talking with a client one-on-one, there was this big aha moment, this creative energy that would happen between us. And I can feel my body lighting up right now, because that, to me, that just tickles me. It tickles my soul that suddenly they go, "Ah, I get it." And I'm like, yeah, you know, you have a personal brand, yes. But it's not just about the color of the tent that you've chosen and, you know, this cute little logo that you've designed. It's so much deeper than that. And so, you know, and then, of course, you know, this is in the early 2000s. And when Microsoft came along, and said, hey, we're going to develop front page. A lot of the entrepreneurs and small business owners were like, oh, I can do my own website. And I'm like, but wait, I can help you. And of course, it was difficult to get small business entrepreneurs to understand that they really needed guidance rather than, oh, well, since Microsoft has created, this template for me, I'll just use the template. So then everybody started looking the same again. Well, then this actually provoked me in building my own empire with my art on it. And so since then, I have designed and developed several hundred products over the years. I sold them worldwide. I sold them from my brick and mortar as well as online. And then my products got featured in local news stations, national news stations, and in movies. The icing on the cake was I got to design a mask for a superhero. That was a ton of fun. In addition to that, I was able to pen different articles for industry publications, and then, move from there to help, again, go back and help the artists and designers and other entrepreneurs understand what brand messaging is, because they saw that I was doing it. They saw that when I really honed all of those components, I was able to get featured, right, in news stations, in magazines, and even in movies. And so that's critical if you want that kind of success. So if you want to build that kind of empire, either if you're a metaphysical practitioner to a creative maker, right? Both of them are the same. So yeah, that's my background in a nutshell.
That's great. Wow. Yeah, it's helpful to understand like some of the journey and how you got to do what you do. Yeah, and we really did come up to things from such different directions. Right? I had been a scientist initially. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds like coincidentally we overlapped in the agriculture industry on the way there too, right? So you worked for John Deere and I worked for Cargill. So who knew?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm working in the tools and in playing on their spin steer tractors and having races in the fields.
Can you want to say a little bit about the products that you made and the design that you did that led to all these products? And
Sure, I'd love to. So the products that I started out with actually began with an illustration, and the illustration was calligraphic in nature. Because I love gesture drawing, which back in school when I was in design and fine art, we would have these studio classes, and the studio classes would range from 5-second gesture drawings to 1 hour settings, right? When you'd have a model in front of you and you'd use either whatever medium you wanted, let it be pencil, charcoal, paints, whatever. Because I had so many hours dedicated to gesture drawing, I've always loved the fluidity and the frenetic nature of how I can actually take what's in front of me and place it on paper as fast as I can. And I also taught myself calligraphy. And interestingly enough, I think this was one of the first times I was co-creating and I didn't know it. One evening, I had met my new boyfriend and his parents came down to, it was actually during the holidays, and they came down for a couple of days and we were having movie night. Well, the funny thing was my mother-in-law to be was off to the side knitting, and she wanted the lights up a little, just a little, so that she could see herself knit. And we had 8-month-old tabby cats at the time, so adorable, cute kittens. So we're watching the movie, and we had one of those big televisions on the screen. Remember those? Or big televisions on the floor with a big screen. And it was a huge behemoth. It was really tough to move around. So we had that turned on. And my mother-in-law dropped her ball of yarn. Well, my 8-month-old tabby cat goes running across the floor. And as he ran across the floor, the light from the TV shone on his back, from tail to tip to tail. And suddenly I got this aha moment. And I'm like, hold on, guys, wait a minute. Can we pause the movie for a second? I need to get my sketchbook. And they're like, yeah, sure. Right. So I'm climbing over my potential father-in-law, right, who's as big as Hagrid, big, gentle giant. And he's like, okay, move on through. And I grab my sketchbook, come back to the couch with Andrew, and I start sketching. And he's like, whoa, I think you got something. And I'm like, I think I do too. I don't know where this is coming from, but I know I've got to get it down, right? So go ahead, start the movie, and I'll just be here sketching. Well, interestingly enough, after developing a series of what they were, the cats, then I developed a series of dogs and other animal creatures as well as immobile objects like garden supplies and things like that. And what I did was I started my product line as original brush and ink illustrations of cat gesture drawings. And then what I wanted to do was broaden that product line. So I created reproductions and then note cards. So they were at 3 different price points. So that way, anybody who enjoyed my art could afford it. Then beyond that, I started dabbling in product creation, as well as licensing my illustrations for products with manufacturers. And interestingly enough, over my shoulder here, and I'll reach behind and get it in a second, is a wine tote. It was one of our novelty products after creating jewelry with my art on it and handbags with my art on it. Everything featured my art in one form or another. And so by taking the sample illustrations, here's an abbreviation of Bacchus and the Ball of Yarn, right? So very clean calligraphic lines. And then keep this head in memory. Keep that in memory, because you are going to see the same head in a medallion where I was inspired to blend Marrakesh, Celtic, and the cat head into one simple design. So you can see how simple to complex my imagery got, and how I was able to position it onto different products that sold worldwide. These became some really great sellers for me. So again, yeah, the range of products that we created in the business: jewelry, masks, other novelty items like six-pack toast, because, you know, if you're going to create something for wine lovers, you got to create something for beer lovers as well. So what was a lot of fun, Laureli, creating these products, is that when we were on the floor, what I call the shop floor, customers would come in and they'd start looking at their products and they're like, oh, this is really cool, you know, and I'd let them know that we handcrafted everything featured my art. And if they wanted some kind of customization, they were welcome to contribute to the design. So the funny thing was, and the fun thing was, we would have equestrian riders come in and they'd say, I would love to take this with me. We take wine with us on the trail. I would love to take this with me on the horse. And I'm like, well, I can create a nice long body strap for you so you can carry it across your body. And they're like, oh, you could do that. And I said, then if you want to put it maybe around the pommel of the horse's saddle, you could wrap it around there or put it in a bag behind you, whatever you need, right? So that gave us the opportunity to build a better product, is to talk with the customers and say, how would you use this? How would you improve it? How would you use it so that other people would want to have the same kind of product? So yeah, then we had motorcyclists come in, you know, giving us their ideas and how they would, you know, modify it so they could wear it. That to me is a whole lot of fun.
So so it sounds like did you do the leather work yourself, or you had a shop of other people that you did the leather work too?
No. Wow. Yeah, it was Andrew and I. And the key to really making our time efficient was doing things in batches. So that way, you know, if we had a customer come in and they wanted some custom work, I would already have, you know, these products in line to make. And I'd say, okay, you know, I'm happy to do a custom product for you, but it's going to be 2 weeks before I can get to it, because I knew what my process was. And that's key. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, goodness. So many differences too between service businesses and product businesses. So many different things to track. And
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think talking about service design, a lot of people overlook that. Product design, people love product design. Product design is sexy, right? But service design, I think when it comes to, when we talk about customer touch points, it's the moment a customer walks in the door, right? What do you say? Do you say hello? How do you say hello? Is it hola? Is it, you know, howdy, right? It's all of those different flavors on how you greet your customer at that very first point. And then as the customer moves through, let's say, your virtual store, right? What are some of those touch points that's going to delight your customer? So I would go shopping in other shops, in other stores, you know, from Prada, Coach, Neiman Marcus, all of them, to kind of get a flavor as to how they would approach their customers, what annoyed me, what delighted me, right? And go, okay, I'm not doing that, but I'm definitely going to adopt that into, my store. So it was a lot of fun to be able to give people space to breathe as they would walk through the shop. And so, service design is critical from end to end, right? From saying hello to actually checking out at the cash and wrap stop. What is going to keep them engaged, entertained, and, move into action to buy that product.
I'm going to link back to the metaphysics and wellness fairs that I run. I regularly give people the suggestions to walk through the fair and look at how everyone sets up their booths. So how do they arrange things? What kind of fabric do they use? What stands do they use for products, and how much they have on the table, and all kinds of different things like that. How do they position them? And I've never thought to walk around and see how everyone greets people or how they don't greet people.
Yeah.
How much space do they give them, and what things do they say when they do speak? So I know I have a pattern of what I do when I talk to people, and I haven't gone around and done a sampling. So that's great.
Yeah,
a great thing to do.
Do you want to kind of share what you do, and I will then be a counterpart to that and talk about what I see where people could improve.
Sure, that's great. Well, I personally, I do something, right? So I do intuitive eye reading, which is this unusual modality, which on the one hand, people don't know about, so they need to know something. And the second thing is it can be really intimidating to people, because if I'm reading eyes, if they turn and look at me, I'm already reading them. And they worry that I'm already reading them, and I am. So I need to do something that helps people learn about what it is, get curious about it, and also has them feel comfortable. So what I've done that works well for me is I've created a business card that's double-sided, and the back side is set up so that I can write. And as people are walking by, I just say, would you like a free sample? And I have little signs on my booth that say free, ask me, what does it say? Ask for a free glimpse of your eyes. So they know that there's something free. They know there's something they can do to get it to happen. And I'm offering it to them. So some people are like, oh, what's this? What are you offering? And it gives me a chance then to talk about what it is that I do. And it gets them engaged in a way that doesn't stop pressuring. It's not like they feel like they need to buy anything. And it's an opportunity that I can demonstrate what I do and get them interested, and often have them want more. And they also have my contact info with notes about them that they get to take with them. I've had some people keep it for 2 years and come back and say, see, I still have my card.
Yeah. You just said two things that I would love to double back on. The first one was ask me about, right? And I think that's incredibly vital and engaging when it comes to, customers walking through. Because when I started with just the calligraphy cats, right, I had the prints, the greeting cards, and the note cards. I wouldn't stand at my booth or hide behind my booth like many other artists. I would be out in front, and I would, people would walk up and they'd start to interact with the cats, and they go, oh my God, these are kind of neat. My first question to them is, are you a cat lover? And they're like, oh yeah, I got a couple of cats. 9 times out of 10, it would be, yes, I have cats. I love cats. The oddball, the one person who wasn't a cat lover would say, I don't like cats, but these are neat. I love your designs. I'm like, thank you. Right. And so that is so critical when it comes to starting to warm up the customer, because what you're doing is you're kind of breaking the ice, and you're letting them breathe without the sales pressure. I'm not saying, oh, which one do you want to buy? Right. No, it wasn't that. It was getting to know them a little bit first, so they could just kind of, okay, she's not going to pressure me. We're just going to have a conversation. So I love that. I love that you do that. And then the second one, well, actually 3. The second one was your business card. The fact that you have double-sided your business card is also critical. It's one thing to have, your name, your logo on one side, but then to flip it around and ask another engaging question, right? Or something that makes the customer stop and think. Because oftentimes small business owners, people at fairs, will say something to a customer, but they won't ask them a question. That's the engaging part. When a person is walking along, if you say something, just making a statement, they won't actually think about it. They'll just kind of like, okay, thanks, bye. Right? Yes.
Yeah.
But when you ask them a question, the brain turns on. And when the brain turns on, they stop, they pause. And it's like, ooh, okay, wait a minute. right? And that's the clincher. That's the hook. So the business card, I love that idea. And what I would do is, as a product designer, I wouldn't create business cards. I'd create postcards. And so it would be a nice clean front with my URL on the front. And I wouldn't hand them out. They would sit there on the table. And if somebody said, hey, I need to swing by, but I love your stuff. Do you have a business card? I'm like, no, but I have a postcard. And then I would engage them with, they're like, oh, good, my birthday's coming up. And I'm like, that's a great idea. What I want you to do, and this was really fun, I'd say, I want you to take this, put this on your refrigerator, tack it up on the front of your refrigerator, and then tell your husband that if, when your birthday's coming up, you want something from Lisa Stewart Designs. If he owes you an apology, you want something from Lisa Stewart Designs. And that made them laugh, right? Again, their whole demeanor just broke down. They're like, oh, this is fun. And they're like, I'm going to do that. And like you just said, they'd come back around. They're like, I kept your postcard. I did exactly what you told me to do. I put it on my refrigerator and I told my husband. I can't tell you how many times I got that. And that just lit me up. I love that idea. So nice job, Laureli.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, just learning over time. Like I had to find a way to share about my work that was really comfortable for me. And yeah. So people that have products, so you had the example of the postcards. I guess I didn't do postcards or something larger because a lot of people, when they're carrying a bunch of things around a fair and they don't have a bag to put them in or something like that, I know they would lose different things. So you probably, because you're a designer, your postcards would be beautiful. So for someone like me, where it's not as much beauty, it's more of information. And I was just like, give them something small that they could tuck in somewhere. But I do have like sheets and things like that with information that people can take with them. But it's always like a juggle of like what's enough and what's too much and where. I think even just with giving free samples and things like that too, for me, when am I giving too much? And so like just a little bit, but where people feel deeply seen and they're pulled in.
Right.
And I've had to learn to say no when people ask for a lot more for free. Like, oh, that's why I do a reading and here.
Yeah. Would you like to book a session? Right. This is just a nice touch. But I think you touched on something just moments ago, and that is the postcard, right? The business card versus the postcard versus, brochures and pamphlets and things like that, and how much information is too much when they're juggling. A couple of things that I've been playing with. One, QR codes. They ebb and flow, right? Back in the early 2000s or so, the large part of Americans didn't like QR codes, and I couldn't understand it. And I'm like, QR codes are the bomb. Are you kidding me? Because then this gets them to your website and they get hooked in and they can see more. If you send them to a specific landing page, then you can measure those metrics and go, oh, yeah. So when I was at the fair, I had 10 people click on the QR code. And then from there, I could see that they continued on and I could see them, moving from page to page to page, what was their customer journey as they were on my website. I know that European museums are big into QR codes. This helps them. Yeah, this helps the audience move through from through the exhibit, right? From station to station to station. And I love that idea. And so, I think, what, Laureli, I just had a great idea. Wouldn't it be fun to have a scavenger hunt at one of your MeWe fairs?
There are actually some places that have done that. I just ran a fair in Ocean Shores. And the person used to do that. There was I don't remember quite what it looked like, but it was a funny, interesting little like doll character. And it would move to different places in the fair. And anyone that found it would bring it up to the front counter and they would get a prize.
That's fun.
So yeah, it's a way of encouraging people to go all the way through the whole thing and definitely be looking for things as they go through.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. And it would also be fun to maybe use QR codes too, to like get into people's websites and things like that. So that'll be a fun idea to play with. But then, so I've been playing with QR codes. So people, so I don't have to worry about print, right? I don't have to worry about, do I have enough postcards, right? Are my postcards going to arrive quick enough? Because I like to design at the last minute. And I can I can go in and make edits and tweaks on my website all day long, right?
So you're saying a QR code on a sign on your,
yeah.
So people can just get it right there and then they're on your website on their device.
Exactly. exactly. And I've done this with my coaching. I've done this with booking a session. And most recently, I've done this with the Mystic Makers business portal that I've just launched. And then secondly, I covered the postcard, I covered the QR code, and what's too much. I think that's really all I wanted to say about that. But
it's, and then people design their booths differently. So I have a table and I'm standing behind the table. So I'm reaching out to people, but not like too far out into the space. Some people will, I know they have a booth, they have several tables in the front and they really hang at the back and just let the product be the thing that draws people in. Some people have special lighting. I'm thinking of like crystals and jewelry in particular, like the salesperson really can get in the way sometimes. And then there are other people that will design their booth as a U. And then they're standing out there in the middle and they need it to be a big enough space that there's space for people to walk in too, and how to, right, to be available and to not get in the way at the same time, or how to say something, as you were giving examples, that like pulls people in to look more deeply.
Right. And I think this was funny. Many years ago in one of the industry pubs I was featured in, they had a back page, and every month they would feature something on this back page. It was like the inside, the last sheet before the back page, right? And it would be a great cartoon. It was a lot like what Reader's Digest would do. It would be like the wordless comics that you could actually understand and get a lot of value out of, the gestures and the people actually in each storyboard, and go, oh, I get it now, right? This particular business magazine talked about how to set up your booth and how not to approach customers. And it had me on the floor. It was so funny because, they talked about the U shape, for instance, and many times that's how I would set up my booth with all of my products, is in a U shape. And what Andrew and I found, and what we discovered, was that if both of us were standing there, it would prevent people from coming in because it would block, right? So I'm like, okay, what we need to do, we need to set up a strategy here. Okay, one of us stands in the booth, but it's however you want to stand. And when somebody comes in, you move away from that customer, giving them breathing space, right? And the other one can stand across the aisle or go walk around or whatever. But if you see a lot of people coming into the booth, then come in and help. But we don't want to crunch, right, and create sardines. It's like a human car wash, right? Like a dance floor and a rave. You don't want that in your booth. And in this article, they talked about, and I'm trying to remember, it was like soldiering, right? Guarding your booth, because you got two people standing in front of your booth, it's blocking them. The other one, that the one that had me on the floor, was the different gestures and the way you hold your body in the booth. So even if you're a single person in the booth, don't put your hands in your pockets, right? Because it looks like you might be hiding something. And then also don't lean with your hips. Don't bow your hips up, because it looks like you're groining. Don't groin your customer. I laugh so hard at that. And I'm like, okay, I'll remember not to do that.
All these subtle things that really convey so much information and the impact on our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, standing in front with your, arms clasped lightly in front of you is probably one of the best stances you can have. But, as soon as you can open up and show that you're not a threat to your customer, then you can start engaging and you can start having just a casual conversation that doesn't add the pressure that the customer's not looking for. So, yeah.
I say there's so much subtlety in reading each individual customer. Are they someone that wants to talk and wants information, or are they someone that just wants space, and all those things that we get better at over time?
Right. One of the key things that I learned when it came to engaging with customers was, one, as a maker, don't launch into showing everybody how my product is made, because they don't care how the sausage is made, right? They want to know what the product is going to do for them, right? So when you look at a product, let it be a service or a 3D product, you can introduce the product, but introduce the benefits of the product, not the features so much. So you get the benefits, you get the features of the products, or rather the features and the benefits. And so when you go onto Amazon, for instance, and you go shopping, when you look down through the bullet points, you'll see features, and then you'll see the benefits that are attached to those features. And when you think of having that conversation with your customer about how the product can benefit them, right? So like say, for instance, the wine tote, right? I didn't launch into how it was made, like how many stitches I put into it, whether it was, hand stitched or, machine stitched, or, how many times I stained the medallion that got stitched and riveted on. I didn't go into any of that. It was the beauty of the aesthetic of the product itself. And then I talked about how you could use that product, right? You could take this with you if you don't have a bottle of wine. If you have to buy a bottle of wine to take to a friend's house, right? Take the case with you, buy the bottle of wine, so that way you can look interesting, right? You can look like you have it together. And I said it much more eloquently, 10 years ago when I had this shop, but I didn't. In many cases, the products spoke for themselves, but you still had to kind of reinforce, right, the benefits of those products. The fun thing about the beer tote, a customer asked me, they said, so I wonder if it keeps the beer cold. It probably doesn't. And I'm like, actually, it does. And so I measured, and we also had little individual bottle cozies that I brought in a beer into my little incubator shop at the time, set it there on my desk and said, okay, it is now 12 o'clock, right? Let's see how long this is going to stay cold. It stayed cold for 4 hours. So it stayed cold for several hours. And
well,
so
at a minimum, just being all near each other like that, they probably keep each other colder.
Yeah. But also when you think about
it's insulation.
It's actually cow skin, right? So it's insulation. And so when people understood that if they packed their beer in this so they could look, sexy and savvy, taking it out to their boat, they knew that they had, there's a window of time when you're packing the car and then you're driving to the boat and then you're loading the boat and then you go out to the lake, right? So there's all this time. It could be 2 hours or so. And the first question is, how long does it keep it cold? I said several hours, at least 4 hours. So you've got enough time to pack your car and get out to the lake. And they're like, okay, sold. Right. So that way, when you start introducing the benefits of your products and services, say no more. So that's one thing that I started to learn and address immediately when the customer would come in. So my first point benefit would be, we handcraft everything and everything features my art. Because when I would look at the products I was developing, and knowing that companies, heritage brands like Coach, went from making in New York City to outsourcing in Vietnam, right? A lot of people still thought Coach handmade everything in the US, and I would have to educate them and say, no, that's no longer true, right? I keep tabs on my competitors. And that's one of those nuances and in small messagings that, Coach just kind of leaves out, and she's like, our customers don't care. I know my customers care. I know my customers want everything handcrafted by a consulting adult, right? And so, you handcraft all this? Yes, this is all, and this is everything that you see. We don't have a big inventory in the back. So it's all those tiny little things that they weren't aware of because they made so many assumptions. And that's one thing that you really want to do, is cancel out all those assumptions and answer those objections as your customers are coming through, and really qualifying you as a product maker or as a service provider, like a metaphysical practitioner.
Yeah. Great.
So let's see, is anybody? The chat is quiet, but that's okay. This is our first time and we're just playing around, getting used to the tools. And I think we're doing all right.
I think so too. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, maybe I'd say, so when you were making these leather products, how did you decide when you wanted to diversify and make another product, or whether you wanted to focus and go deeper in some way on the products that you already had, like work on selling them to more places, or how do you make those kinds of decisions?
Good question. And I think there's probably like three different ways I could go with that question. A lot to unpack there. So the first,
and I'm thinking the context of all the service businesses that we work with, and the product businesses, and all just the different vendors and practitioners that we talk to. No,
absolutely. So I think the first question is, and let me write these down. Product line.
Well, yeah. So when to make more different products or have more different classes or more blah, blah, blah. And right, when to go deeper and more deeply selling the one that one has already.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about product line. So in many cases, I would test, right? So when I did the originals, prints, and greeting cards, I knew that they were different sizes and in different price points. So that was a product line. Then the next product line, I really had to consider something incredibly meaningful that would make sense to my customer base. So the actual next product was, funny enough, I wanted to be able to create in mass, right? In when I say mass, I say small production line. And small production line meaning products like journal covers or pillow covers. So you saw Bacchus on the front of the notebook, which actually Andrew hand cut that for me. When we were walking through one of the trade shows, one was called the National Stationery Show, and that was in New York City. And they would have a resource section next door. And my idea of continuing the product line was that it had to maintain the cleanness of the line, right? The cleanliness of the calligraphic line, because not only did I just put brush to paper and wipe it across the substrate, which is the watercolor paper, but I also took great care in the thickness and the thinness of the line, because when we start talking about gestalt and from a visual standpoint, I think you and I talked about it before. From a visual standpoint, gestalt, if nobody knows, is really a German concept of, if you think of a line, right? So if I were to say, okay, between my two fingers is a line, you see a line. But if I say to you, okay, now imagine I break up that line into a series of dots and move your eye from one point to the other. Well, your brain fills in the spaces between the dots, which creates a line, ergo gestalt, right? And so for me, it was important that as I created the volume of the cat, so if the cat is hunching its back and then its tail is curling back up again, how do I, as an artist, depict the volume of the body without filling it in with tone, right? Color or whatever that looks like. And so for me, it would be about taking that line from the head, which was a medium thickness, and then down the neck really thin, and then back up across the back would be really thick. And that would help inform the brain, the volume of the cat. So yeah, it wasn't just a matter of saying, oh, look at me, I've drawn a cat. It was paying attention to the proprioception of the cat in space. So taking that was super important to being able to translate that line and that gestalt onto other products. So in this resource, the resource room that was adjacent to the National Stationery Show, there was a manufacturer who had, it was, if I can remember how to say it, they created die cuts, custom die cuts, and they were predominantly known for creating die cuts for stationery, right? So you could create a little box and then fold it up and glue it. Ta-da! You had this beautiful little 3D product from this template that they would create. So they created hundreds of these metaled die cuts. And so when we talked to them and said, hey, can you do custom work? And they said, yeah. And then ding, 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 Andrew and I were like, now I can start transferring Bacchus into other products. And so then the next question was, what materials can this cut? And they said, well, it can cut anything. And the interesting thing was, I actually had a piece of leather on me. And I said, will it cut leather? And they said, yeah. And I said, okay, can you run this through? Because they had a machine there on the floor. And I said, can you run this through and cut it for me? So it looked like a printing press, an old fashioned printing press. So you'd have your die and your material. Sometimes it was paper, and they'd run it through under the cylinder, and then you could peel back the paper and then remove the template. And so they did that with the leather. And I'm like, you got yourself a sale. So I purchased, after the show, we had a conversation. I sent them my Illustrator file, so that way they could then take that, make the die, and then send it back to me. And I bought the whole kit and caboodle, so that way I could create many products. So back to your question. So I took the Bacchus die cut, and I had two sizes. So the larger size was on the pillow, and the smaller size was on a journal cover. And so what I did was, I knew that I wanted to pair my journal covers with journals that already existed. So for instance, I matched them up with Moleskine because I knew there was a huge cult behind Moleskine journals. And so if I knew that I could piggyback off of a brand name saying these covers fit Moleskine journals, then people would already be satisfied, right? Like, oh, yes, I love Moleskine. Yes, I want a cat journal. And then I could create custom colors, right? So I would, do like red on black or blue on white or whatever. So it was always different and varied. So that allowed me to create a variety of different color combinations with one product. So that allowed me to expand that product line from a journal point as well as pillows. Now, on to your second question about distribution, right? So how many do I decide to make? And I think that really comes down to what capacity do I have to actually build these products? And do I want to build journals for the rest of my life? Or can I find another company that can do it for me? Well, there were considerations I had to make, right? I wanted to make sure the company was in the United States, because I wanted to make sure that all my products were made in the USA. So then it was a matter of finding these manufacturers around the country and doing test runs with them. Were they capable of doing it? What were all the gray goods I had to send them? So we did some test runs, and it just never worked out for us. But yeah, we would send them like a final pillow and say, okay, so this is what the pillow needs to look like. Here are my little tags that need to go in it. This is how you put it together. And so they'd do a test run of 10, and we would evaluate them. So then it really was a matter of saying, no, the unit cost isn't enough, because we'd really have to jack up the retail cost. And we really haven't tested these enough. And we don't think that we're in the location to sell at this price point. So those were all those tiny considerations that we would have to make before we would decide.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, goodness. And so in this case, you were looking at the quality of the product. So you had ideas of different products you could make, and really looking at the quality and cost effectiveness. And I appreciate so much what you did by making things that would fit Moleskine journals, because it's a way that you're allowed to mention these other brands of items, and then all the values that people associate with that brand, they're now associating with your product.
Exactly. And I think that's really important. And that's a very good point that you just brought up, because when a maker sets out to create a product, right, how can they augment a product that's already out there? Or do they make their own product, and then can they piggyback, that brand name to associate with them? But when they're doing that, and this is part of the product design that I talk about in the portal, and that is when you are making a consumer product, a 3D product that you're going to purchase off the shelf, you want to make sure that you use materials that befit the price point. So for instance, when I started making jewelry, right, I had to make this decision. Do I make precious metal jewelry, or like sterling silver, right? And so I had a US manufacturer etch sterling silver earrings from me that had Bacchus on them. So little rectangle earrings that you might see me wearing here and there. And the next consideration is, what kind of hook do I put in that earring? Don't use a base metal, right? Make sure that you use a sterling silver or maybe gold, whatever that is, that matches the value of the main product that you're using. Many makers get that mixed up, because if you get that mixed up, then you start sending mixed signals to your customer, and your customer is not sure whether or not they should trust your product. And if they can't trust your product, should they trust you? So be very careful when you're selecting all those materials for the final product.
No, I just like thinking about different aesthetics of how people share their work. Some people, I'm thinking about products again. Some people will have, tables that are just richly full, like so filled with things, where there's so many options for the customer. And then there's another vendor I'm thinking of that is very dainty and kind of sparse. It's very simple, like there'll be a dish with 3 things. And as soon as something sells, she replaces it, but it's always kept very simple.
Right.
So the eye has lots of space and sees the specific aspects of the products, where it's the energy of the display that she's getting at, and not only the product itself.
Absolutely. When I walk through the fair, when I'm exhibiting at the MeWe fair, I'll walk through and I'll talk to the product vendors who are there. And in some cases, they haven't built their own product. They may be reselling, or they may be doing, like I say, a piggyback, right? Where they're creating a product based on something that already exists. And many times I find that they're frustrated because they don't seem to be selling. And what I try to remind them of is that very thing, is to give the eye space, so that way that I can take it in. And the analogy that I use is when you are framing a piece of art, right? You have a mat that goes around the art in many cases, and then you have a frame. What that mat does is it gives the place for the eye to rest and then bounce back into the painting. It's kind of like a swimming pool, right? It's like you're walking around the rim. It's like, where do I jump in? Where do I jump in? And that's what you want when you are displaying your work at any show, as well as on your website. But we'll talk about shows for now. But yeah, I think you're right. When you display work and you give it enough space for the eye to dance and move across each one, that's so important, because you're also telling a story, right, with those products. When you're designing this little in situ scene, and that's what you're doing, putting little scenes across the table, and suddenly the customer is starting to develop that story by that scene. And my whole body's lighting up again. And there are a couple of vendors that come to mind that do this very well. And for me, that's exciting, because that's when they start selling. Many vendors they want to show everything, right? Because they're afraid that either something's not going to sell, or the customer hasn't had a chance to decide among all the 50 other things that they have to offer. And I remind them, like, no, less is more, less is more, less is more. Because there is a really good study that came out probably about 20 years or so ago. And I'm not sure if you know about this, but there's a study that came out. It's called the Jelly Study. And I think it was in Whole Foods. It was in a grocery store, where somebody came out with all these jellies and jams, and they filled this table of samples, like 35 different samples. Customers would come up and they couldn't make a decision. They're like, ooh, is it the blackberry with, cumin, or is it, avocado with, succotash, or what? I don't know which one to choose, right? And of course, if they were to taste all of them, your tongue would get all mixed up, and it's just like so much party that then you can't taste anything. They came back and they put 5 jellies on the table. Suddenly, the jellies were selling like crazy, because people would then choose 1 or 2 to sample, because in many cases they would discount. They would look at the labels, they'd read them, and they go, okay, this one's out, this one's out, this one's out, and then it would be down to 2. So when you are looking at that kind of decision making in the customer's head, especially when they are trying to get out the door and manage their kids who are screaming and yelling, going, mom, mom, and all the chaos that they're dealing with, right? The what they had to put up with at work, and now they need to get home, and they need to cook dinner before the partner gets home, and they got to do this and that, the other. You end up creating decision fatigue when you overload your customer with too many decisions. So yeah, that's an excellent point to bring up. Less is more.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder. So I just thinking about ways I can simplify my booth and have fewer things out there, knowing I've got them back to bring them up if they're wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just another thing I think about. No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say what you could do is just, as somebody, steps up to your table and you have one or two items on there, you can start talking to them about X, Y, and Z, pertaining to what's on the table. And then as that conversation grows, you can go, oh, by the way, I have this item as well, right? So that way you can introduce it gradually into the conversation.
Yeah, and mine too is even at the quantity of the one item. So if I have three different items, how many of each of those items do I have on the table? Do I have one? Do I have three? Do I have seven? 7 is clearly too many. And yeah.
The trick here's a little trick. My recommendation is to put one each on there, because then it looks like scarcity. And I don't want to, lean into the whole fear factor of things. But when customers go, ooh, if this is her last one, I better grab it. Right. And then they buy it, and then you replace it.
Here's another one and I don't know what to do with this one. So my book, my co-author chose an off-white, it's very white book cover. So it's just, and it kind of everything is perfect. You can totally see if there's ever a slight mark on it or anything like that, a bend or crease or anything. And so I have one book that's a little beaten up. I don't remember what happened to it. So that's my sample, and it clearly says sample on it. And then I have the neat, clean ones that I'm so careful with. Do I use the sample one, or does it detract from sales because it doesn't look as nice?
That's a really good question.
And if I have a sample, do I have a neat, clean one underneath, and then it's 2 and it's not 1?
Well, what you could do is I have a vision of maybe a stack of 3 clean books, and then maybe an easel with the sample on the easel. So you see the easel that's stacked on top of the book. So they can't move the easel off and grab a book. They pull off the sample, they flip through it and go, yeah, I think I want this. Because that way, the number 3 is always a powerful number, but it also shows them that that's not the only book. They always have an option to choose a clean book. So,
and you have the easel is behind or on top of?
The easel.
Which way did you say?
Of the books.
It is on top of. Okay. Okay. I need to get a little easel and test this out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
and make sure the easel is heavy, because then suddenly the customers, this is something that Pottery Barn ran into as an aside, but if the easel is heavy enough and the person pulls the book off, the easel is not going to come with the book, right? So is it a matter of maybe putting a band, maybe a ribbon, a really thick, tight band around the books, and then you tuck maybe the foot of the easel under the band. So
I got to think about the easel not denting the books that are on top too. So there's all this, all the layers of all these things.
Yeah.
This is where I almost start to think of, I almost think of a clear plastic thing that goes over it. You can see through it, and the books are underneath, and then the easel and the stand are on top.
Yeah. Or if you had the plastic box, and you could lean the sample book up against the plastic box as well. You could do something like that. And then maybe maybe a candle or a flower or something on top of the box, right? To give, because what you're doing is when you separate your book out, either on top or add a flower next to it, you're exalting that product. And when the customer sees a product that's been exalted up on a pedestal, they're like, ooh, that must be important.
Yep. So many things.
Yeah. So display is key. And I think you were going to say something else before
all right. This is great. Yeah. There's just so many places we could go.
Yeah. Well, it is 5:58. Is there anything else that we want to talk about and wrap up before we say adieu to our audience?
Well, and we should say something about our upcoming events. So
yes.
Let's go see when the next ones are. So twice a month, we've been offering these drop-in business coaching and mentorship events so that people can come talk about their intuitive businesses. We give them help and support. And you clearly, from watching, everyone can see that we've got lots of ideas for just about any question that people would share with us. And we have 2 scheduled in September, and the next one is Wednesday, September 13 at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And then after that, we've got Monday, September 25 at 7:30 p.m. And yeah, so these are sliding scale. So it's great to come and get some support and give us a donation for your time, for our time and value for sharing with you. Yeah, there's information at the MeWe Fairs Facebook page, for example, MEWEFAIRS.com. And you've got this information now on your YouTube channel. Do you want to share? And yeah, let's share a bit more about all of what you have going on and you've got this new offering.
I do. Before we move on to me, I will let everybody know that the link to MeWe Fairs Online will be in the description box. So just go there, and then I will also connect. YouTube has a way for me to connect to your YouTube account as well. So it'll funnel people over and traffic them to your channel as well. But yeah, so beyond that, I am offering Mystic Maker's business portal. It is open to beta users now, and this is going to be an online comprehensive business training. It's going to be everything that you need to start a business, to become a go-to authority and guide. And if you want to learn more about that, head to my website at CoCreateMagick.com with a CK. And I will also have a link in the description as well. And I can't wait to talk with you again, Laureli, and maybe we'll do this again because I'm enjoying these lives. So thank you very much for hanging out with me today. And everybody else, and stay magical.